I, 32M, married Jeanette, 30F, 4 years ago, and her mother Zoe and brother Landon came with the deal. I need to get this out now because what I found last week changed everything, and I'm about to make moves that I can't take back. My grandmother Lily raised me. Parents split when I was 9. Dad disappeared. Mom was in and out until she was just out. Lily was it. She owned her house, had savings, lived carefully, and when I was 26, she told me everything was set up to come to me. Sole beneficiary. Lawyer handled it all properly. I didn't dwell on it because Lily was healthy and I figured that was decades away. Met Jeanette through a coworker a year later. Her family felt like the thing I never had. Zoe was always around, always cooking. Holidays were loud and full. Landon was the classic younger brother who made everyone laugh. We married after 18 months. What I didn't understand then was that Zoe hasn't worked in over a decade, and Landon bounces between gig work and her couch. Jeanette kept them both afloat, and after the wedding, that became my job too. It started small, a bill here, a car repair there, then rent, then Zoe's apartment deposit because family takes care of family. Every time I pushed back, Jeanette made it clear that questioning her mother meant questioning her. 8 months ago, Lily got sick. Nothing sudden, but the doctors found issues and she needed more help. I started going over 3 or 4 times a week. Groceries, appointments, keeping her house up. I told Jeanette about Lily's condition and about the estate because I thought my wife should know. Dumbest decision of my life. Within 2 weeks, Zoe became very interested in my grandmother. This woman met Lily twice in 4 years and suddenly wanted to visit and bring food and help out. Then Zoe started asking Lily questions about her house, her plans, whether she needed help with paperwork. Lily told me on a Thursday that Zoe kept calling and pushing about her finances. Lily said she told her everything was handled with her lawyer, but Zoe wouldn't stop. That same week, a piece of mail from Lily's lawyer never arrived. The firm confirmed they sent it. I let it go. Then, a second piece went missing. Then, a third. All estate-related. Regular mail arrived fine. I started paying attention and noticed Jeanette grabbing mail before I got home on her days off. I also noticed Zoe had a key to our apartment that I never gave her. When I asked Jeanette, she said her mom always had a spare, which was impossible because we moved in 11 months ago and I handled the locks myself. Last Wednesday, Jeanette left her tablet logged into WhatsApp in the living room while she showered. I picked it up and found a group chat called Family Planning with Jeanette, Zoe, and Landon. I read through 3 months of messages. Zoe from about 2 months back. That boy has no real family watching his back. Nobody is going to check us, he trusts Jeanette, and that is all we need. Landon. Easiest situation we've ever had. Grandma is old and confused, and he's too busy playing good grandson to notice. Lily is not confused. She is 81 and sharper than all 3 of them combined. Then Jeanette. My wife writing things like, he genuinely thinks I care about his grandmother. I just keep him calm while mom handles the paperwork. And Albert doesn't suspect anything. He's so focused on being helpful he can't see what's in front of him. Zoe had been researching how to position herself as Lily's informal caretaker to get access to her accounts. Landon was asking about retitling the house and whether they needed my signature or could work around me. Jeanette said she'd been practicing my signature and had already pulled documents from the mail she intercepted. I read everything for about 40 minutes. Didn't say a word. Put the tablet back, told Jeanette I was going to the gym, and drove to Lily's house instead. I sat in her kitchen and told her everything. Every message, every plan, every word they said about her and about me. Lily looked at me and said she'd had a bad feeling about Zoe for weeks and was glad I caught it. That was 6 days ago. I haven't confronted Jeanette or Zoe or Landon. I go home every night and act normal and eat dinner and sit next to a woman who is actively conspiring against my grandmother. Every night after Jeanette falls asleep, I open the tablet and read new messages and screenshot everything to a cloud account she doesn't know exists. They have no idea I know. And I'm not going to tell them yet because I am not just going to leave and let them land on their feet and find the next person to do this to. Lily and I have been talking to her lawyer all week, and what we are putting together is not a conversation. I'll update soon. Right now, I keep my head down and wait. Okay, so I need everybody to understand something. This man went home after reading those messages where his wife called him a useful idiot, where they literally named the group chat Family Planning, like they're running a heist with a cute name. And he sat on that couch and watched a cooking show. He ate dinner across from this woman. He said goodnight, and he did that for days. Because I'm sorry, most people see he genuinely thinks I care about his grandmother from their own spouse, and the next sound is a door coming off its hinges. Albert sat down and started building a case like a man who understands that rage is a luxury and patience is a weapon. And like, okay, the actual devastating part here is why this family targeted him. Not because he had money, not because he was careless, because he was alone. They looked at a guy who grew up without parents, who was raised by one woman who loved him enough to be everything, and they said, perfect. Nobody's watching. That is a level of predatory thinking that most people can't even imagine because most people don't look at somebody's loneliness and see an opportunity. Zoe walked into this man's life, gave him loud holidays and home-cooked meals, and the entire time she was just fattening the pig before the slaughter. And Lily, 81 years old, and her immediate reaction wasn't fear, it was, I knew it. Grandma had the read on Zoe before Albert even found the messages. That woman has been navigating people like Zoe for 60 years longer than any of them have been alive. They called her confused. They're about to find out what confused looks like. Update 1. Alright, so a lot has happened since my last post, and some of you were asking me to update, so here it is. If you haven't read the original, go do that first, because this is going to move fast. After I found the WhatsApp group, I spent about 10 days just watching, reading their messages every night, screenshotting everything, acting completely normal at home. It was the hardest thing I've ever done because every time Jeanette asked me how Lily was doing or said something about wanting to visit her, I had to just nod and smile knowing exactly why she was asking. But I kept it together because Lily's lawyer, Zachary, told me the more they put in writing, the stronger our position would be. And he was right. Here's what I learned during those 10 days. Zoe had already gone to Lily's house twice without telling me. Once when I was at work and once on a Saturday when Jeanette told me she and her mom were going shopping. Both times she tried to get Lily to sign paperwork that would give Zoe authorization to handle Lily's bills and correspondence. Lily refused both times, but here's the part that made me lose it. In the group chat, Zoe told Jeanette and Landon that Lily was getting confused and that next time she'd bring the papers already partially filled out so Lily would just need to sign. She literally described my grandmother as someone who wouldn't know what she was signing if you presented it the right way. Lily is sharper than Zoe will ever be, but the fact that she was banking on manipulating an elderly woman into signing over access to her life, that told me exactly who I was dealing with. Meanwhile, Landon had been doing his own research. He was sending links in the group chat about property transfers and asking whether a spouse could claim inheritance rights during a marriage. He was specifically looking into whether Jeanette, as my wife, could have a legal claim to anything I inherited from Lily, and whether that could be redirected. The messages made it clear this wasn't some casual curiosity. He was building a roadmap, and Jeanette was coordinating the whole thing, telling Zoe when I'd be at work, telling Landon which documents she'd pulled from the intercepted mail, and updating them on Lily's health like she was running a project. So here's where things shifted. About 4 days after my last post, Lily and I went to see Zachary together. Lily is 81, but she walked into that office and laid the whole thing out like she was presenting a case. She told Zachary about Zoe's visits, about the pressure to sign documents, about the phone calls pushing for financial access. Zachary had us put together a detailed timeline, and he started preparing something he called a protective declaration, basically a legal document where Lily formally states that she is of sound mind, that no one other than me has authorization over her affairs, and that any documents obtained through deception or without her informed consent are invalid. He also had Lily update her power of attorney paperwork to add extra layers of verification so nothing could be changed without multiple confirmations. But here's the new problem that came up, and this is the part none of you saw coming because I sure didn't. While I was at Lily's house going through her mail to make sure nothing else had been tampered with, I found a notice from her bank. Someone had called the bank pretending to be a family member and requested information about Lily's accounts. The bank didn't give out details because of security protocols, but they flagged the call and sent Lily a notification. The call came from Zoe's phone number. Zachary told us this was important because it showed a pattern of behavior that went beyond just family nosiness. This was someone actively trying to access another person's private financial information. I also found out something about why Zoe treats me the way she does, and honestly, it explained a lot. Through the older messages in the group chat, the ones I had to scroll way back to find, Zoe had been talking about me since before the wedding. She told Jeanette that I was a good pick because I had no family infrastructure. No parents involved, no siblings, no one who would ask questions or push back. She literally called me low maintenance because nobody would come looking if things got complicated. She saw me as someone without backup, and that's exactly why she approved of Jeanette marrying me. I wasn't a partner to her. I was an opportunity. Landon's messages were the same energy. He told Jeanette early on that she should lock me down because guys without families are easier to manage and less likely to have anyone checking the finances. This wasn't something that started when Lily got sick. They've been thinking about this since before I even proposed. So now I'm sitting on all of this. I have the screenshots, I have the bank notification, I have the protective declaration filed, and I have Zachary working on next steps. Jeanette still has no idea. She came home last night and told me Zoe was planning to visit Lily again this weekend and asked if I thought that was a good idea. I told her, sure, sounds nice. Because what she doesn't know is that Lily's lawyer has already sent a formal letter to Zoe stating that any further unsolicited contact regarding Lily's financial or legal affairs will be treated as attempted elder interference. Zoe should be receiving that letter tomorrow. And that's when this whole thing is going to blow open because there is no way Zoe gets that letter and doesn't immediately call Jeanette. And when she does, I will be sitting right there watching my wife's face when she realizes the wall just got a lot closer. More soon. This is a whole family of predators. Like, I need people to really sit with that. This isn't one bad apple. This is a mother who trained her daughter to hunt, a brother who does recon, and a wife who runs operations. Jeanette is out here giving Zoe Albert's work schedule so she can ambush an 81-year-old woman alone in her house with pre-filled paperwork. She's updating them on Lily's health stats like she's a project manager sending out sprint reports. Lily has a doctor's appointment Tuesday, mobility is declining, window is narrowing. That's not a daughter-in-law. That's a case officer running an asset. And you know what breaks my brain the most? Scrolling back and finding out this wasn't even reactive. They didn't see Lily get sick and think, oh, opportunity. They saw Albert and thought opportunity. Before the wedding, before the ring, before any of it, Zoe handpicked this man like she was drafting a fantasy football team. No parents, no siblings, no infrastructure. That's our guy. Landon co-signing with guys without families are easier to manage. These people sat around a dinner table years ago and decided to harvest a human being because he had the audacity to grow up without parents. They weaponized his loneliness against him and then gave him Thanksgiving dinners so he wouldn't notice. But the thing they fundamentally miscalculated, and this is where I genuinely want to stand up and applaud, is that they assumed having no family meant having no one. Albert has Lily, and Lily walked into a lawyer's office at 81 and presented a case. Not crying, not confused, not the helpless old woman Zoe was banking on. She walked in there and started naming dates. That's not a grandma, that's a general. That lawyer letter about to hit Zoe's mailbox is going to land like a flashbang in a one-bedroom apartment. Update 2. You guys. I cannot even begin to describe what the last week has been like. If you told me a month ago that I'd be sitting in my car outside a grocery store typing a Reddit update at 11 at night because I can't go home yet, I would have called you insane. But here we are. Buckle up. So the lawyer's letter hit Zoe on a Friday. I know the exact moment because I was sitting on the couch with Jeanette watching some cooking show and her phone started buzzing nonstop around 7:30. She glanced at it, said it was her mom being dramatic about something, and went to the bathroom with her phone. She was in there for 40 minutes. When she came out, she told me Zoe was upset about a neighbor dispute and she might need to go over there tomorrow. That was the first lie of the evening. I checked the tablet after Jeanette fell asleep and the group chat was on fire. Zoe had sent photos of the letter from Zachary. She was furious, but not in the way I expected. She wasn't scared. She was strategic. Her first message was asking Jeanette whether I could have found out or whether the lawyer was just doing this on Lily's own initiative. Jeanette said there was no way I knew anything because I was sitting right next to her acting completely normal all night. Landon jumped in saying they needed to speed everything up before more legal barriers went into place, that they'd been moving too slow and this was proof they were running out of time. Then Zoe said something that I keep going back to because it shows how these people actually think. She said that the letter didn't matter because Lily was elderly, and if it ever came down to a dispute, she could argue that Lily was being isolated by me and that Zoe was simply trying to help a vulnerable senior. She was already flipping the narrative. She was going to use her 2 visits to Lily as evidence that she was a caring family member and that I was the one keeping Lily away from people who wanted to help. And honestly, that terrified me because it wasn't stupid. It was calculated. The next 3 days were chaos in that group chat. Landon started pushing Jeanette hard about getting me to sign something, anything, that could give them a foothold. He kept saying I was the weak link and that Jeanette just needed to put a document in front of me mixed in with regular household paperwork and I'd sign it without reading. Jeanette pushed back on that, not because she was protecting me, but because she said I'd been more careful about paperwork lately and she didn't want to risk tipping me off. So she was observant enough to notice I was being more cautious but not observant enough to wonder why. Meanwhile, I was not sitting still. Lily and I went back to Zachary on Monday and laid out everything new from the group chat. Zachary told us that what Zoe described, positioning herself as a concerned family member to challenge Lily's autonomy, was an actual tactic that people use, and it needed to be countered preemptively. So he had Lily do a formal cognitive evaluation with her doctor. Lily passed with flying colors because, again, she is sharp, and that evaluation is now on file. If Zoe ever tries to claim Lily is confused or being manipulated, there is a dated medical assessment that says otherwise. But here's where the new pressure came in, and this is the part I haven't told anyone except Lily and Zachary. The apartment Jeanette and I live in, the lease is in both our names, but I've been paying the full rent for the last 2 years because Jeanette's paycheck goes to covering Zoe and Landon's expenses. Every month, I watch my wife send money to her mother and brother while I cover our entire household. I never made a legal issue out of it before because I thought it was temporary, and because I thought we were a team. Now I know we were never a team. So I told Zachary I wanted to understand my options for the apartment, and he connected me with someone who handles tenant and lease situations. I'm not going to get into all the details here, but what I will say is that I've started the process of separating my financial obligations in that apartment in a way that is going to hit very hard when the timing is right. On Wednesday, something happened that added a completely new layer to this. Jeanette told me over dinner that Zoe had been talking to a friend of hers who used to work at an elder care facility about how to file for informal guardianship over someone who didn't have adequate family support. Jeanette said it casually like it was just conversation, but she was testing me, watching to see if I reacted. I just nodded and said that sounded like a lot of paperwork. Inside, I was already texting Zachary under the table because informal guardianship is a real legal process, and if Zoe actually tried to file something, it could create a bureaucratic nightmare, even if it ultimately failed. Zachary told me he would file a preemptive objection with the county if anything appeared in the system. And then came Thursday. Jeanette came home from Zoe's place and told me she thought we should move Lily into an assisted living facility because it would be better for her health and we could help manage the transition. She framed it like she was being thoughtful and concerned. But I'd read the group chat from that morning where Zoe specifically told Jeanette to suggest assisted living to me because if Lily was in a facility, it would be easier to argue she couldn't manage her own estate. The whole thing was a setup, and Jeanette delivered it to me with a straight face like she'd just thought of it herself. I told Jeanette that Lily was doing fine at home, and I didn't think she needed that kind of change right now. Jeanette pushed back, said I was being stubborn and that I couldn't take care of Lily forever by myself. I told her Lily had her own routines and her own support system, and that moving her would do more harm than good. Jeanette got frustrated and said I was too emotionally attached to see what was best for Lily. I nearly lost it right there, but I held it together because the timing isn't right yet. I'm still in the apartment, still acting normal, still reading that group chat every night, but the pieces are almost in place. Zachary has the screenshots, the bank notification, the protective declaration, the cognitive evaluation, and the timeline of everything Zoe has done. Lily's estate documents have been reinforced and secured. And I have one more thing I need to do before this whole thing comes down. I can't say what it is yet, but I'll update as soon as it happens. To everyone in the comments telling me to just leave, I hear you. But leaving isn't enough. These people targeted my grandmother. They targeted an 81-year-old woman because they thought no one was watching. Someone has to be watching. That someone is me. Alright, so Zoe's immediate response to getting a legal cease and desist was not panic, not regret, not even anger really. It was strategy. She got that letter, and within the hour she was workshopping a counter-narrative where she is the hero, and Albert is the abuser isolating a helpless old woman. That's not a person who got caught doing something wrong. That's a person who has been caught before. You don't develop that reflex the first time. Normal people receiving a lawyer letter about elder interference have a, "Oh God, what have I done" moment. Zoe had a, "Here's how we spin this" moment. This woman has run this playbook on someone else. I would put actual money on it. And Jeanette, sitting across from her husband at dinner, delivering scripted lines about assisted living that she rehearsed with her mother that morning, watching his face for micro-reactions like she's running a social engineering test. That is genuinely one of the most chilling things I've ever read on this website. She's not a wife who got pulled into her mom's scheme. She is an operator. She noticed Albert was being more careful with paperwork but couldn't connect the dots to WOI, which tells you everything about how these people think. They're so convinced they're the smartest ones in every room that the idea Albert might be outplaying them literally doesn't compute. It's not even on the list of possibilities. In Jeanette's mind, Albert being cautious is a tactical inconvenience, not evidence that he's already 10 steps ahead. And honestly, the fact that this man is sitting across from his wife every night, watching her perform concern for his grandmother, knowing she called him a useful idiot in writing, and his response is to calmly text his lawyer under the table. That is a level of emotional discipline that most people will never achieve. Albert grew up without parents and raised himself into the kind of man who protects the one person who protected him. Zoe looked at that and saw a weakness. She's about to find out it was the opposite. Final update. This is the last one. I told you guys I had one more thing to do and now it's done, and I can finally talk about everything that happened. Some of you called it in the comments, but I don't think anyone predicted exactly how this played out. The one thing I needed to do before blowing this open was get Jeanette on record. Not just the WhatsApp messages, which could be dismissed as family venting or taken out of context, but something directly from her mouth where she couldn't claim misunderstanding. So, on a Sunday morning, I told Jeanette I wanted to talk about our future, about Lily's situation, about what happens down the road. I framed it as me being stressed and needing her input. And Jeanette, who had been running this con for months, saw an opening. She started by saying we needed to be realistic about Lily's decline, and that it made sense for us to start thinking about what role we would play in managing her assets when the time came. I asked her what she meant by us. She said, well, obviously we're married, so anything you inherit is something we manage together, and I think my mom could help with the house since she has experience dealing with properties. Her mother has never owned a property in her life. I asked about Landon, and Jeanette said he could help with the physical side of things, cleaning out the house, handling repairs, whatever was needed. I kept asking questions like I was genuinely considering all of it, and she kept going further, talking about how Zoe had already looked into the process of transitioning ownership and how there were ways to start that process even before anything was finalized with the estate. She laid out the entire plan thinking she was recruiting me into it. What she did not know was that I had been recording the conversation on my phone, which was sitting face down on the kitchen table. I did not tell her I was recording, and I know that's a legal gray area depending on where you live. Zachary had already told me that in our state only one party needs to consent to a recording, and that party was me. So everything she said is admissible if it ever comes to that. 2 days later, I executed the rest of the plan. I moved my things out of the apartment while Jeanette was at work. Not everything, just what I needed. Clothes, documents, my laptop, personal items. I moved into Lily's spare bedroom, which we had already set up for this exact moment. Then I went to the leasing office and formally notified them that I was removing myself from the lease at the end of the current term, which was 5 weeks away. Jeanette had never paid rent on that apartment, not once. Without my income covering it, she would need to come up with the full amount on her own or move out. And since she sends the majority of her paycheck to Zoe and Landon every month, there is no version of this where she can afford it. That evening, Jeanette came home to a half-empty apartment and no explanation. She called me 17 times. I let every call go through and did not pick up until the 18th because I wanted her to sit with it. When I finally answered, she was at Zoe's apartment and I could tell they were both there. She asked me what was going on and I told her I knew everything. I told her I'd been reading the WhatsApp group for over 3 weeks. I told her I knew about the intercepted mail, about Zoe's visits to Lily, about the bank call, about the guardianship research, about her practicing my signature, about every single message where they called me stupid and pathetic and a useful idiot. I went through it point by point and I did not stop talking for a long time. Jeanette tried to reframe it immediately. She said I was misreading the messages, that it was just her family being protective, that Zoe was only trying to help and I was blowing everything out of proportion. I told her that suggesting someone retitle an elderly woman's house is not being protective. She switched tactics and said she loved me, and that we could work through this and that every marriage has rough patches. I told her that calling your husband a useful idiot to your mother and brother is not a rough patch, it's a confession. Then Zoe got involved. She started going off about how I was ungrateful for everything they'd done for me, how they welcomed me into their family when I had nobody, how I should be thanking them instead of threatening them. I told Zoe that welcoming someone into your family and scheming to steal from their grandmother are two very different things, and she should probably get familiar with the distinction quickly because Zachary had already filed the protective declaration and the preemptive guardianship objection, and that any further contact with Lily would be documented and potentially reported. Zoe kept going, said I was making enemies I couldn't afford, that I had no family and no one would back me up. I told her she was wrong about that because the only family I needed was 81 years old and tougher than everyone in that room combined. Landon tried to get on the phone at some point and started telling me I was overreacting and that everything they discussed was hypothetical. I told Landon that hypothetical people don't call banks pretending to be relatives and hypothetical people don't research property transfers with specific addresses. He went quiet after that. The aftermath has been exactly what I expected. Jeanette cannot make rent alone, and Zoe's apartment is too small for both of them long term. Landon is still on Zoe's couch, which means 3 adults in a one-bedroom. Zoe cannot go near Lily anymore without risking legal consequences. The documents Jeanette intercepted are worthless because Zachary had all of them reissued and the originals voided. And the recording of Jeanette describing the entire scheme in her own words is sitting in a secure cloud drive and with Zachary. I filed for divorce last Thursday. Jeanette has tried to reach me every day since, alternating between saying she loves me and saying I'm going to regret this. I don't respond to either version. Lily is safe. Her estate is locked down. Her house is her house. Her accounts are her accounts. Nobody is getting near any of it. I'm living with her now, and honestly, for the first time in 4 years, I feel like I'm in a house where nobody is pretending. To everyone who followed this from the beginning, thank you. A lot of you told me to just leave early on, and I understand why. But these people targeted my grandmother. They saw an 81-year-old woman and decided she was a payday. They saw me and decided I was too isolated and too trusting to ever catch on. They treated both of us like we were disposable. They were wrong. 17 calls. He let 17 calls ring out because he wanted Jeanette to sit in that half-empty apartment and feel the exact silence she thought she was married to. Every unanswered ring was Albert giving her back the loneliness she tried to exploit in him. That's not petty. That's poetry. And look, I want to talk about the phone call because every single person on that line reacted exactly the way a con artist reacts when the con falls apart. Not with remorse, with rotation. Jeanette's first move was, "You're misreading the messages." That didn't work, so she pivoted to, "I love you. Every marriage has rough patches." When that didn't work, Zoe jumped in with the audacity Olympics. You should be thanking us. Thanking them. For what? For the privilege of funding their entire household, while they forged his signature and tried to steal his grandmother's house? Zoe really stood there and said, "We welcomed you when you had nobody." Like that was charity, and not the setup for a long con. She literally admitted to the strategy in the same breath she was denying it. You have no family, no one will back you up. She's still trying to weaponize his isolation in the middle of getting caught. That's not a defense, that's a reflex. That's muscle memory from doing this before. And Landon. My guy hit them with, "It was all hypothetical." And Albert came back with, "Hypothetical people don't call banks pretending to be relatives." That line ended a whole man's participation in the conversation. Landon went so quiet you could hear his future employment prospects evaporating. But honestly, the part that's going to stay with me is the ending. 3 adults crammed into Zoe's one-bedroom apartment with no income stream, no mark, no scheme, and no next move. Meanwhile, Albert is in Lily's spare bedroom, the room they set up together for this exact moment, eating breakfast with the woman who raised him, in a house that belongs to her and will always belong to her. He spent 4 years in a family that was performing love at him like a dinner theater production, and now he's back in the one house where nobody has ever pretended. These people built their entire plan on the assumption that a man with no family was a man with no one. They confused being alone with being unprotected. Albert had exactly one person in his corner, and that one person was enough to dismantle their whole operation. Zoe had a whole team, a daughter running point, a son doing research, a network of elder care contacts, and she lost to a guy and his grandma and a lawyer named Zachary. Sometimes the smallest family in the room is the most dangerous one. Albert, wherever you are, Lily raised a good one, and she knows it.